She was still wearing her wedding dress when he found her. Not dancing, not crying, not waiting for someone to come back. Dying. Temperature, -22. Pulse, barely there. Lips the color of a February sky just before everything goes dark. And the man standing over her? A ghost himself. A soldier the world had already buried alive, living alone in mountains most people couldn't find on a map. He didn't know her name, didn't know her net worth, didn't know that saving her life would start a war that would try to end his. All he knew was she was still breathing, barely. If this story grips you from the first second, you're exactly where you need to be. Hit subscribe and ring that bell, because the stories on this channel don't slow down. Drop your city or country in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you make it to the end, you'll understand why Ghost is the real hero. Let's begin. The storm came in the way bad things always do. Not with warning, not with ceremony, just there. Suddenly, everywhere. Like it had always been waiting behind the tree line, patient as a sniper, holding its breath until the moment you stopped paying attention. Cole Mercer had lived in the Iron Ridge Wilderness for 2 years, 3 months, and 11 days. He knew this because he marked it, not out of sentimentality, but out of habit. Operators counted things, days, rounds, exits. It was how you stayed calibrated when the rest of your mind was trying to come apart at the seams. The cabin sat at roughly 7,400 feet elevation, a 12-mile hike from the nearest paved road, which itself was a 40-minute drive from the nearest town, which itself barely qualified as a town. 2 gas stations, 1 diner that closed at 3 in the afternoon, a post office the size of a bathroom. Cole had chosen this place specifically because it was the kind of geography that discouraged visitors. He'd been watching the storm roll in since mid-afternoon, tracking the pressure drop the way he used to track enemy movement, without instruments, just feel. The sky had gone from steel gray to the particular shade of white-purple that meant serious business. The wind had shifted twice. The temperature had already fallen 14 degrees in 6 hours. He'd sealed the door, added a second log to the fire, checked the weather radio, static, and clicked it off. Ghost was lying by the door. That should have been the first sign. The German Shepherd weighed 91 pounds and possessed, in Cole's professional estimation, better tactical instincts than half the men he'd served with. Ghost didn't pace, didn't whine, didn't waste energy on things that didn't matter. When Ghost chose a position, it was deliberate. He never lay by the door. Easy, Cole said, not looking up from the map he was refolding. Old topographical, the kind that didn't need a signal. Ghost didn't move. But his ears, both of them, sharp as radio antennae, rotated forward, locked onto something Cole couldn't hear yet. Cole set down the map. He'd learned a long time ago not to question the dog. He was reaching for his jacket when Ghost stood up, went rigid from nose to tail, and let out a single bark that hit the walls like a gunshot. Not the bark that meant a deer in the tree line. Not the bark for a fox nosing around the woodpile. This was the other one. Cole was already moving. He dressed fast the way soldiers always dress fast. Every layer with a purpose. Every second counted. Thermal base. Fleece mid. Gore-Tex shell that had been to Kandahar and back. Gloves. Balaclava. The Ka-bar went on his belt without conscious thought. 12 years of muscle memory doesn't ask permission. He grabbed the flashlight, checked the battery with one click, and opened the door. The storm swallowed him. Wind at probably 35, gusting to 50. Visibility down to maybe 40 feet. Snow coming in sideways, the kind that stings exposed skin like static electricity. Cole tucked his chin and stepped off the porch, following Ghost, who was already moving through the dark with his nose down and his body low. Purpose, Cole thought, watching the dog. He's got a heading. They moved northeast, fighting the incline, through timber so dense the wind dropped to something almost bearable beneath the canopy. Ghost moved without hesitation. No circling, no backtracking. Whatever scent had cut through a blizzard and reached him through a sealed cabin door, he had it locked. They crossed a creek, frozen solid, ice groaning under Cole's weight, and climbed another 100 yards up a slope that would have discouraged most people. Cole didn't slow down. His legs were mechanical things by now, shaped by years of ruck marching through terrain that would have wrecked a civilian's knees before noon. He almost missed the cabin. It was small, smaller than his, set back into the hillside like it was ashamed of itself. The porch half collapsed, snow piled chest high against the north wall. No smoke from the chimney, no light in any window. The kind of structure that didn't look inhabited so much as abandoned, and not recently. But Ghost was sitting at the door, looking back at Cole with that flat, expectant stare that meant, "I've done my part. Your turn." Cole put his hand on the door, pushed. It wasn't locked. It swung inward with a groan of frozen hinges, releasing a pocket of air that was somehow even colder than the storm. Stale and still, the cold that collects in places where heat has been absent for a very long time. He swept the flashlight beam across the interior. One room, broken cot against the far wall. Overturned table. A fireplace full of ash gone cold and damp. Miscellaneous debris. Rusted cans. A torn curtain. Shattered glass from a window someone had boarded up, and then the board had fallen. He almost turned around. Then the beam caught the white. Cole crossed the room in 4 steps. She was in a wheelchair positioned, and the word positioned hit him like a slap, because that was exactly what it looked like, deliberate, calculated, against the interior wall. Still wearing a wedding dress. White. Full length. The kind that cost more than Cole had made in a year as a junior enlisted man. The fabric was torn at the shoulder, and the hem was dark with mud and something that might have been dried blood. Her head had fallen to the side. Her hands were in her lap, bare, fingers slightly curled. Cole pressed 2 fingers to her neck. The pulse was there. Weak. Thin. Like a radio signal from something very far away that you weren't sure you were actually receiving or just hoping for. "Hey," he said it sharp. The way you talk to someone you're not sure is still with you. "Hey, open your eyes." Nothing. "Ma'am, I need you to open your eyes right now." Her lashes moved, the tiniest tremor, like the effort was enormous. "Cold," she said, or tried to say. It came out broken, her lips barely cooperating, the word dissolving before it finished forming. "Yeah." Cole was already stripping off his outer shell, wrapping it around her shoulders. "Yeah, I know. I've got you. Don't try to talk. Just stay with me." He assessed quickly the way his combat lifesaver training had drilled into him so deep it was reflex now. Lips. Cyanotic. The blue-purple of real hypothermia. Not just cold and uncomfortable. Skin. Marble white on the exposed areas. Fingertips. Waxy. She was past shivering, which wasn't a good sign. Shivering meant the body was still fighting. When the shivering stops, the body starts surrendering. He checked her pupils with the flashlight. Sluggish response, both equal, no obvious head trauma. She's been here a while, he thought. Hours. Maybe longer. He looked at the wheelchair, looked at the terrain they'd have to cross to get back to his cabin. Not optimal. He looked at Ghost standing in the doorway, snow crusting on his black fur, watching Cole with complete faith. "Okay," Cole said, mostly to himself. "Modified carry. Let's go." He got his left arm under her knees, right arm behind her back, and lifted. She weighed less than he expected, which told him something he didn't want to think about right now. She made a small sound, not quite a word, not quite a cry, and her head dropped against his collarbone. "I've got you," Cole said again. Not as reassurance, as a statement of fact, an operational commitment. He walked out into the storm. 12 years in the Navy SEALs teaches you a lot about what the human body can endure. It also teaches you what it can't. Cole had done cold water immersion training until his core temperature dropped to the point where the instructors started watching him with that particular look that meant they were calculating risk. He'd been through CRA, survival, evasion, resistance, and escape, which involved being cold and wet and miserable for days, in ways designed to simulate captivity. He knew the mechanics of hypothermia in the precise clinical way you know things that have tried to kill you personally. None of that made the walk back feel any shorter. She faded in and out as he moved. He could feel it, the quality of her weight changing, the occasional small tension when she surfaced enough to register what was happening, then the heavy looseness when she slipped back under. He talked to her the whole time, not about anything meaningful, just sound, presence. Something for her nervous system to anchor to if it was looking for a reason to keep working. "Stay with me. Almost there. Cold won't kill you tonight. You hear me? Not tonight." Ghost moved ahead, clearing the path, his dark shape barely visible in the whiteout. A guide with 4 legs and perfect instincts. When the cabin lights appeared through the trees, the amber glow of the fire Cole had stoked before leaving, visible through the window like a lighthouse. Something in his chest unwound slightly. Just slightly. He kicked the door open, carried her inside, and got her onto the cot nearest the fireplace. Piled every blanket he owned on top of her. Added 2 more logs to the fire until the heat was almost painful to stand near. He stripped the wet wedding dress sleeves as far as he could manage without... He stopped himself, oriented, worked around what he could access, and replaced what he could with dry wool. He checked her pulse again. Stronger. Not strong, but stronger. He got water heating on the stove, watching her the whole time, tracking the color in her lips and fingertips the way he used to track vitals on the field. It was maybe 40 minutes later, during which Cole did not sit down, did not stop watching the rise and fall of her chest, that she opened her eyes and kept them open. Brown eyes. Dark. Slightly unfocused at first, scanning the unfamiliar ceiling like she was running a diagnostic. "You're safe," Cole said. He was sitting on the floor now, back against the wall, elbows on his knees. Deliberate distance. "You're in my cabin, about a mile from where I found you." She looked at him. "Who are you?" The voice was rough, dried out, but the intelligence in it was immediate. She wasn't confused. She was assessing him, sizing him up the way people do when they've learned not to trust the first available answer. "Cole Mercer. I live here." He paused. "Who are you?" A beat. A calculation he could almost see her running. "Evelyn," she said. "Evelyn Cross." Ghost, who had installed himself between Cole and the cot with the impartiality of a professional, lifted his head at the sound of her voice. "Is that a dog?" "German Shepherd. His name is Ghost. He found you." She looked at the dog for a long moment. Something in her face shifted. Not softened, exactly, but shifted, like she'd just recalibrated something. "Good dog," she said quietly. Ghost's tail moved once, just once. He wasn't one for excess. Cole heated broth from a can. Not romantic, not impressive, but caloric and warm, which was all that mattered, and helped her sit up enough to manage it. She held the mug herself after the first minute, which he took as a good sign. Her hands were steadier than he expected. The color was coming back, slow but real. She didn't offer more. He didn't push. He understood people who needed silence after something like that. He'd needed it himself, once or twice, in circumstances he didn't revisit in polite company. But she was working up to something. He could feel it the same way he could feel a change in weather, a quality of stillness before the shift, pressure building behind the eyes. "The cabin I was in," she said finally, staring into the mug. "Someone put me there." Cole didn't say anything. "My fiancé." She said the word like she was biting through a piece of metal. "There was supposed to be a wedding this morning, or I don't know how long I was out there. I've lost track." "You were out there for a while," Cole said carefully. "Cold like that." "He left me." She looked up, direct. No self-pity in it. That was what caught Cole off guard. Not horror, not tears. Something harder than that. A woman staring at a fact she'd maybe already suspected and was now forced to admit. "He put me in that chair, took the wheels off. I'm a paraplegic, the chair is equipped, but he took the mobility attachments. And he left me." Cole absorbed this. "In a blizzard," he said. "Yes." "In a wedding dress." "Yes." He didn't say what he was thinking, which was that what she was describing had a word for it, and the word wasn't abandonment. He looked at the fire instead, watched a log shift and settle, sending a brief cascade of sparks up the flue. "Do you have family I can try to reach?" He gestured toward the radio on the shelf. "Satellite gear, I can try." She opened her mouth, closed it. The first genuine hesitation she'd shown. "No," she said. "Not? No, not yet." She was quiet for a moment. "Can I stay here tonight?" Cole looked at her. "Yeah," he said. "You can stay here." He gave her his cot and slept on the floor in front of the fire. Ghost stayed between them. Not choosing sides, just maintaining position. The storm raged against the roof for most of the night, throwing itself at the windows with the blind fury of something that had missed. Cole didn't sleep much. He lay there in the dark, cataloging what he knew, which wasn't much. A woman, a wheelchair, a wedding dress, a fiancé who apparently decided hypothermia was a cleaner solution than divorce. He'd operated in enough environments, corporate corruption investigations, hostage recoveries, intelligence assets gone wrong, to recognize the shape of a problem like this one. The person at the center of it rarely understood the full scope until it was almost too late. What does she have that someone wants? That was always the question, always the engine underneath this kind of violence. He was still turning it over when the sound reached him. Not the storm. The storm had its own rhythms, and he knew them by now. Something else. An engine. Multiple engines. Heavy vehicles, from the sound of them. The low diesel rumble that meant something with real weight. Moving up the access track toward his cabin, which meant whoever was driving knew exactly which track to use. Ghost's head came up in the dark. Cole was on his feet in seconds. He crossed to the window, stayed to the side, and peeled the curtain back an inch. 3 black SUVs, Escalades, from the size, had stopped in the clearing outside the cabin. Expensive. Tinted. Running lights only, no headlights, which meant they weren't interested in being seen from a distance. Doors opened. 4 men got out of the flanking vehicles first. Dark clothing. The particular way they moved, measured, spread, covering sectors, told Cole everything he needed to know about their training. Private security. High-end. Then the middle vehicle opened. A woman stepped out. She was perhaps 60, impeccably dressed in a coat that belonged in a Manhattan lobby, not a mountain access road in a blizzard. Her silver hair was precisely arranged. She moved through the snow without hurrying, without looking down, like the mountain owed her a clear path and she expected it to comply. She stopped 20 feet from Cole's front door and looked directly at the window, directly at him. Cole let the curtain fall. He turned. Evelyn was awake, had been awake, from the look of her, sitting up in the cot, rigid, the mug of broth still in her hands, staring at the window with an expression Cole recognized. He'd seen it on the faces of people who'd just realized the thing they were afraid of had found them ahead of schedule. "You know who that is," Cole said. It wasn't a question. Evelyn's jaw tightened. "That," she said quietly, "is Margaret Voss, my fiancé's mother." Outside, a knock landed on the door, polite, measured. The knock of someone who wasn't asking. Ghost rose to his feet. Every muscle in the dog's body went to iron, and from somewhere deep in his chest came a sound that wasn't quite a growl. Lower than that, older than that. The sound a predator makes when it has identified the threat and is simply waiting for permission. The knock came again. Cole looked at Evelyn. Evelyn looked at the door. "She didn't come to bring me home," Evelyn said. The fire crackled once, sharp as a gunshot. "I know," Cole said. He moved toward the door. Cole opened the door before the third knock landed. He filled the frame without trying to. 6'2", broad through the shoulders, 12 years of operational weight distributed in the particular way that doesn't come from a gym. He'd left the K-bar on his belt. Visible. Not accidental. Margaret Voss stood on the porch with the stillness of a woman who had spent decades learning how to make other people feel small in their own spaces. Up close, she was striking in the way expensive things often are. The coat was cashmere, the jewelry understated but real, the posture of someone who had never once in her life waited for permission to enter a room. She looked at Cole the way people look at furniture they're considering moving. "Mr. Mercer," she said. Not a guess. She knew his name, which meant she'd done her research in the time between Evelyn disappearing and right now, which told Cole several things simultaneously, none of them comfortable. "That's right," he said. "My name is Margaret Voss. I believe you may have found someone who belongs to our family." She smiled. It was a precise smile, calibrated, the kind that had probably worked in boardrooms and courtrooms for 40 years. "We've been terribly worried. If Evelyn is here, I'd very much like to take her home where she can receive proper care." Behind Cole, Ghost had moved to stand at his left leg. Not in front, not aggressive, just present. The growl had dropped below audible frequency, the kind of sound you feel in your sternum before your ears register it. "She's resting," Cole said. "Of course. She must be exhausted after her ordeal." A brief pause on the word, the kind of pause that was doing a lot of work. We have a medical team in the second vehicle, fully equipped. It would be so much better for her to be treated by professionals rather than... Her eyes moved over Cole's shoulder, taking in the cabin interior with a glance that managed to be both efficient and contemptuous in these conditions. She doesn't want to go. The smile stayed exactly where it was. That was the tell. A genuine smile would have shifted. This one was bolted down. I'm not sure Evelyn is in a condition to make that determination right now, Margaret said. She's been through significant trauma. She may not be thinking clearly. She seems pretty clear to me. Mr. Mercer. The smile finally moved. Not warmer, just different, the mask adjusting. I don't know what she's told you in the last few hours, but I can assure you that Evelyn has a history of episodes. Confusion. She's not always the most reliable narrator of her own situation. Cole looked at her for a moment. Then he looked past her at the four men positioned in a loose perimeter around the vehicles. Professional spacing. They weren't standing around. They were staged. It's after midnight, Cole said. You drove up a mountain in a blizzard to collect someone at midnight, with 4 armed escorts. We were worried. You said that. He put his hand on the doorframe. She's not going anywhere tonight. She needs rest and she needs warmth, and she needs to make her own decisions in the morning when she's ready to make them. You want to come back then? That's your choice. But right now, I'm going to ask you to get back in your vehicles. Margaret Voss looked at him for a long, still moment. Something moved behind her eyes. Not anger, calculation. She was running numbers, assessing variables, deciding whether the current approach had reached its limit. You seem like an intelligent man, she said. I have my moments. Then I hope you'll think carefully about the position you're putting yourself in. Evelyn is a ward of our family in a legal sense that she's a grown adult, Cole said, and she's my guest. He looked at her directly. Good night, Mrs. Voss. He closed the door. Not slammed, not aggressive, just closed. The quiet click of a man who'd ended conversations in worse places than this and knew that controlled was always better than loud. He stood with his back against the door for a moment, listening. Outside, nothing moved for almost 30 seconds. Then he heard footsteps on frozen ground, the sound of vehicle doors, engines starting. He crossed to the window and watched the 3 Escalades back out of the clearing in a slow, deliberate choreography that was almost theatrical. They didn't leave fast. That was deliberate too. Evelyn was sitting up when he turned around, her back straight against the wall, the blanket pulled to her waist, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, something between gratitude and dread, the look of a person watching someone step into traffic to push them clear and wondering what it's going to cost. She's going to come back, Evelyn said. I know. With more people. Probably. Cole moved to the window opposite, checked the north tree line out of habit. Dark. Clean. Tell me about her son. She was quiet for a moment. The fire had burned down while he was at the door. He added a log without looking away from her. His name is Damon Voss, she said. We were engaged for 8 months. He's 34, runs the investment arm of his family's holdings. She paused. I should say I thought he did. I'm starting to reconsider what I thought I knew. How long were you in that cabin? I'm not entirely sure. We were supposed to have a small ceremony at a lodge about 20 miles from here. Just family, he said. Keep it intimate. Something crossed her face. Not grief. Something more corrosive than grief. Embarrassment at having believed it. The rehearsal dinner was the night before. I went to sleep and I woke up in that cabin. Still in the dress. Alone. Cole sat down on the floor across from her, back against the wall. Not close. Not creating distance either. Just a posture that said he wasn't going anywhere and she could say as much or as little as she wanted. He moved you while you were unconscious, Cole said. Carried you out there. Set up the wheelchair without the mobility components so you couldn't self-propel. He said it plainly, without softening it. He'd found people responded better to directness when they were trying to process something this size. Softening it just delayed the processing. That's not an impulse. That takes planning. Evelyn's jaw worked for a moment. Yes, she said. I've been thinking about that. How much are you worth? She looked at him, directly. The question would have been rude in normal company, and she clearly knew it and equally clearly understood why he was asking. My father founded Cross Technologies in 1987, she said. Defense contracts, satellite systems, proprietary software for federal agencies. He died 4 years ago and left everything to me. A beat. The company is currently valued at approximately $4.3 billion. Cole absorbed that number the way you absorb a change in atmospheric pressure, physically, in the chest. And Damon Voss, he said slowly, was about to marry into that. He was about to marry into controlling interest, yes. The will has a provision, a marriage clause that my father wrote in himself. My husband, upon marriage, gains co-trustee status with the board. Her voice was steady. He'd noticed that about her. She kept her voice steady in the same determined way someone keeps their hand steady after it's been burned. By will, not by ease. I always thought it was an old-fashioned thing my father did because he didn't want me to manage it alone. And now? Now I think someone showed him that clause and convinced him it was a good idea. She stopped, looked at her hands. Or he didn't write it. That last sentence landed quietly between them, and neither of them moved for a moment. Outside, the wind had dropped slightly. The storm was shifting. Cole could feel the change in pressure through the walls. Still dangerous, but the worst of it was passing. Your father's death, Cole said. How did he die? She didn't answer right away. Heart attack, she said finally. He was 61. No prior cardiac history. Another pause. The family physician signed the certificate. A doctor my father had used for 20 years. A doctor who's still practicing? He retired shortly after. She looked at Cole. Something in her gaze had changed since he'd closed that door on Margaret Voss. Settled, sharpened, like a camera, finding its focus. You're asking very specific questions for a man who lives alone on a mountain. Cole said nothing. What did you do before this? She asked. Nothing useful, he said. Get some sleep. We'll figure out next steps in the morning. He could see her deciding whether to push it. She decided not to. Mr. Mercer, she said, as he moved toward the other side of the cabin. Cole. Cole. She held his gaze for a moment. Thank you for not opening that door. I opened the door. You know what I mean. He looked at her once more, the torn wedding dress still visible at the edges of the blankets, the dark eyes that had been calculating since the moment she opened them, the particular straightness of a spine that refused to curve even after everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Yeah, he said. I know what you mean. He didn't sleep. He sat in the chair facing the door with the Glock 19 on the armrest and Ghost at his feet and ran through everything she'd told him, the way he used to run through pre-mission intelligence, looking for the gaps, the inconsistencies, the things that didn't fit the stated picture. A $4 billion target, a father who died conveniently, a marriage clause in a will, a fiancé who spent 8 months getting close enough to be trusted and then chose a blizzard for his exit plan. The wheelchair. That detail kept circling back, the deliberate removal of the mobility components. That wasn't just cruelty. That was a man who'd studied the problem, who knew exactly how she moved and exactly how to stop her. You don't acquire that knowledge in a brief engagement. You acquire it over months of careful watching. Around 4 in the morning, Cole moved to his communications gear, an older setup, military surplus with a few civilian modifications, the kind of thing that raised questions when people asked about it, which was why people generally didn't ask. He switched it on, let it warm up, and pulled out a notebook. He had a list of contacts, not the kind you keep in a phone, the kind you keep in your head, written down only in a notation system that looked like a maintenance log to anyone who didn't know the key. He found the one he was looking for on the 3rd page. Marcus Webb, former Defense Intelligence Agency, retired, or at least officially retired in the way that certain people were officially retired. The last time Cole had spoken to him was 18 months ago, a brief conversation that had been technically about fishing and actually about whether an extraction Cole was considering would create problems for ongoing operations in a region neither of them named out loud. He composed a message, short, oblique in the way that people who'd spent careers in intelligence wrote to each other. Enough context for someone who knew the reference points, nothing useful for anyone else. Running into an old family name, Voss, connected to cross technologies, need backgrounder on corporate structure and any open flags. Also, anything unusual on the founder's death 4 years back. Discretion appreciated. He sent it and shut the system down. Ghost lifted his head from the floor, looked at Cole, then looked at the door. I know, Cole said quietly. They wouldn't wait until morning. That had been obvious from the way Margaret Voss had looked at him. Not the look of someone accepting a setback, the look of someone adjusting a plan. She'd come up a mountain at midnight with 4 security contractors. She hadn't done that on the assumption that a polite conversation would resolve the situation. She'd done it to assess him. Now she had. He moved the chair slightly so he had a clean sight line to both the front door and the window on the north wall. Settled in. Let his breathing slow into the rhythm he'd learned in buds and refined across a decade of environments that were trying to kill him. The particular stillness that isn't sleep but looks like it from the outside. Ghost put his head down on his paws. They waited. The call came at 6:47 in the morning on the satellite phone. Not Marcus. Too soon for Marcus. The man operated on his own timeline, and answering in under 3 hours would have been unlike him. This was a number Cole didn't recognize, which meant it was a number that recognized him. He answered. Mr. Mercer. A man's voice, smooth, precise, the diction of private schools and law firms. Young, mid-30s maybe. My name is Damon Voss. I think you have something that belongs to me. Cole didn't say anything. I want to be very clear that I have no interest in making this complicated, Damon continued. She's not well. You may not understand the full picture of her condition. She has a history of paranoid episodes and what her doctors have called delusional ideation. Whatever she's told you, I assure you, she told me she woke up alone in an abandoned cabin in a blizzard in a wedding dress, Cole said. That's what she told me. A brief pause, recalculating. That's a very distorted version of what happened. There was an argument before the wedding. Evelyn became very upset, very erratic. She insisted on going somewhere to be alone. I tried to stop her. In her wheelchair, Cole said, in -22 degrees. She can be very determined when you remove the mobility components from her chair. Silence. Not the silence of someone preparing an answer. The silence of someone who has just realized that the person they're talking to isn't a confused civilian who can be managed with a smooth story and a credible tone. I don't know what she told you, Damon said. The smoothness had developed a hairline fracture. But I'm prepared to make this very simple. Whatever you want. Compensation for your trouble, relocation assistance, whatever you need. I can make that happen. There's no reason this has to become something neither of us wants. Are you trying to bribe me? I'm trying to find a reasonable solution. For what? Cole said. The reasonable solution to your fiancée being fine is just that she's fine. She goes home. She makes her own decisions. There's no problem to solve. Another silence. Longer this time. Mr. Mercer, Damon said, and the smooth was mostly gone now, something cooler underneath it. You should think very carefully about whether you want to be in the middle of this. I'm not in the middle of anything, Cole said. Good morning. He ended the call. Evelyn was awake. She'd been awake, he could tell, sitting up in the cot with the blanket around her shoulders, watching him with that steady, measuring look. That was Damon, she said. Yes. What did he offer you? Didn't specify. She was quiet for a moment. He will. She looked at her hands. He's good at finding what people want. It's one of the things I thought it was a quality. Attentiveness. I thought he was just attentive. She stopped. The self-recrimination was there briefly, and then she pushed it back down with visible effort. How much time do you think we have? Before they come back? Cole thought about the security team he'd counted, the vehicles, the way they'd staged. A few hours, maybe. They'll want to do this in daylight, cleaner. And when they come back, they won't be asking. No, Cole said. Probably not. She nodded, slowly, processing. I need to tell you something, she said, about my father's will. When he died, his personal attorney delivered a copy to me. The standard version, the filed version that everyone saw. But there was a second envelope. His attorney said I wasn't to open it until I was married. She paused. I thought it was a sentiment thing, something personal he wanted me to read with my husband. Did you open it? I brought it to the lodge for the wedding. Her jaw tightened. It was in my bag, which Damon has. Cole looked at her. You think it's a different version of the will, he said. I think it might be the real version of the will, she said, and I think someone already knows what's in it. Outside, in the distance, too far to be certain, close enough to note, the sound of an engine moved through the trees. Ghost's head came up instantly. Cole crossed to the window. 2 vehicles this time. Darker than before, if that was possible. No chrome, no running lights, moving through the snow cover at a speed that was careful rather than cautious. The difference between someone being safe and someone not wanting to be heard. They stopped at the tree line, didn't come closer, waiting. They're not coming to the door this time, Cole said, mostly to himself. He turned back to the room, took stock quickly. Evelyn, the chair, what he had, what he didn't have, the terrain outside, the options below zero. He moved to the floor panel beneath the woodpile, lifted it. Evelyn watched without asking, which he appreciated. There's a tunnel, he said, not comfortable. About 140 yards through the hillside, comes out above the East Creek bed. From there, it's navigable terrain to a secondary position I have about 2 miles out. She looked at the tunnel opening, looked at the wheelchair. It's wide enough, he said. I widened it when I built this. Old habit. She looked at him then. That look again, the one she couldn't quite suppress. The look that said she was filing something away. You planned for this, she said. I planned for something, Cole said. Get your blanket. We need to move. Ghost was already at the tunnel entrance, nose working, ears forward. Clear, for now. The tunnel smelled like cold earth and old wood and something faintly mineral, the smell of ground that had never seen sun. Cole went in first with the flashlight, checked the supports, checked the floor for ice, then came back and helped Evelyn transfer from the cot to the wheelchair without a word exchanged between them. She was already moving before he finished positioning the chair, pushing herself toward the opening with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had long since made peace with the logistics of her own body. I'll need to tilt you back on the incline, Cole said. I know how tunnels work, she said. He almost smiled. Didn't. Ghost went in ahead of them both, disappeared into the dark, with his nose working the air ahead, tail low, moving in that particular way he moved when he was tracking. Deliberate, efficient, nothing wasted. Cole gripped the chair handles and they went in. It was exactly as unpleasant as he remembered. The tunnel was hand-dug, reinforced with timber framing every 4 feet, wide enough for the chair but not by much, and the floor was uneven frozen earth that made every yard a negotiation. The flashlight carved a narrow channel of visibility ahead of them. Behind them, the panel door was closed. Above them, nothing, just packed hillside and whatever was moving through the snow up there. Evelyn didn't make a sound the whole way through. Not when the right wheel caught a root and lurched. Not when the ceiling dropped 2 inches without warning and Cole had to adjust without stopping. Not when a section of timber framing cracked somewhere in the dark above their heads, and a thin cascade of frozen dirt sifted down across her shoulders. She just kept her head down and her hands in her lap and let him move her through. He noticed that. Filed it. They came out on the east side of the hill into air so cold it felt solid, 140 yards from the cabin and 20 feet above the frozen creek bed below. The sky was the flat gray of early morning moving towards something, not clearing exactly, but the storm's worst energy spent, the kind of pause between systems that gave you a window if you moved fast enough. Ghost was already at the tree line, looking back. Cole tilted the chair down the slope carefully, controlled descent, watching his footing on the ice-glazed surface. Evelyn's hands came up and gripped the armrests. Not panic, just physics, keeping her weight balanced, and they made it to the creek bed without going down. Which way? She asked. East, 2 miles. There's a secondary shelter, not a cabin, more of a cache point with a structure over it. Has a stove, supplies, and a radio with enough range to reach someone useful. Who? Working on that. She looked at him sideways. That's not an answer. It's the answer I have right now. They moved into the trees. The first mile was slow. The terrain east of the creek bed was rougher than Cole would have liked. Mixed conifer with heavy underbrush. The kind of ground that was navigable on foot, but punishing for a wheelchair even with all components attached. He alternated between pushing from behind and moving to the front to lift over obstacles, and Evelyn helped where she could, using her upper body strength in ways that made it clear she'd been doing this for years. Reading terrain, shifting her weight at the right moments, anticipating. They'd covered maybe 600 yards when Cole heard the cabin. Not saw. Heard. The sound traveled through the trees with strange clarity and cold air, sharp percussive impacts that he identified before he consciously registered identifying them. Not gunfire. The kind of sound that preceded gunfire. Doors being forced. Impact on wood. Equipment deployment. They were in the cabin, which meant they'd waited less than 20 minutes after he'd last seen them at the tree line. "They're inside," Evelyn said. She'd heard it too. "Keep moving. They'll see our tracks." "Yes." He didn't stop. "That's why we're moving." The tracks in the snow were unavoidable. The chair left a distinctive double line flanked by his boot prints and Ghost's paw marks. Covering them wasn't an option. Speed was the option. He needed to get to the cache point and get on the radio before whoever was behind them covered the ground. He pushed harder, scanning ahead while he moved, thinking about the terrain between here and the cache. A small rise about a quarter-mile out that would briefly expose them on the skyline. Unavoidable, would have to cross it fast. Then a descent into a narrow draw where the trees thickened. The cache was at the north end of the draw, set into the hillside in a way that wasn't obvious from more than 30 feet away if you didn't know what you were looking for. He was running the numbers, distance, speed, pursuit time, when Ghost stopped. Dead stop. Front legs planted. Head up. Cole stopped. Silence except for the wind in the high branches. Then he heard it. To the north. Foot movement on snow. The compressed crunch of boots, 2 sets minimum, moving deliberately through the trees on a line that would intersect their current heading in roughly 4 minutes. They'd split up. One team through the cabin, one team circling ahead. They knew about the tunnel, or they guessed. Someone briefed them on the terrain. "Change of direction," Cole said quietly. "Where?" "South Ridge. There's a logging road at the bottom. Hasn't been plowed, but it's packed. Faster on the chair." He was already moving, angling south, adjusting the route in real time. "It adds distance." "How much?" "About a mile." She didn't say anything, just shifted her weight to help him turn the chair. They crossed the exposed rise at a pace that made Cole's legs burn and his shoulders ache. He was essentially running while pushing 200 pounds of combined chair and person up a 15-degree slope on ice-crusted snow. His boots found purchase where they could, and slipped where they couldn't, and twice he went to one knee and recovered without going down. Evelyn said nothing. Over the ridge, down the other side faster than was comfortable, controlling the descent with everything in his arms while Ghost swept ahead and came back and swept ahead again like a sensor on a pattern. The logging road appeared through the trees exactly where it was supposed to be. A pale corridor of packed snow cutting through the timber, wide enough for 2 vehicles. The surface compressed by years of seasonal traffic into something approaching usable. Cole got the chair onto it and felt the difference immediately. The resistance dropped. Forward movement became something close to manageable. He checked behind them. Nothing visible. But the team he'd heard to the north would have heard them on the ridge. Sound travels in cold air, and a man pushing a wheelchair up a slope doesn't move quietly. They'd adjust. He pulled out his satellite phone, moving while he checked it. 3 bars, marginal. He called Marcus Webb. It rang 4 times. Cole had counted to 3 and was composing what he'd say to voicemail when the line connected. "You're either in trouble," Marcus said without preamble, "or you know something interesting." "Both." Cole kept his voice low, kept moving. "Did you get my message?" "I got it. I've been making calls since 5 this morning." A pause. The sound of paper moving, something being set down. "Cole, what exactly are you sitting in the middle of right now?" "Voss family, tell me." "The Voss family has 3 active federal inquiries, none of them public. Securities fraud, wire fraud, and a sealed matter. I can't get specifics on, but the agency involved is not the SEC." Another pause. "The Cross Technologies acquisition attempt, because that's what this is, an acquisition, not a marriage, has been flagged by 2 different analysts as a potential antitrust concern, which is the polite version of what they actually think. The father's death." The pause this time was different. Longer. "There's a flag on the estate filing," Marcus said. "Anomaly in the medical documentation. Nothing actionable, which is a word that in this context means someone with resources made sure it stayed that way." He stopped. "Cole, These people are not the kind of problem you want to be someone's solution to. I'm already someone's solution to it. Then get her somewhere with a legal team and a paper trail fast, because the window on this thing is shorter than you think. What do you mean? There's a competency hearing, Marcus said, filed 6 weeks ago in a probate court in Carver County. The petition claims Evelyn Cross is mentally unfit to manage her own affairs and requests appointment of a conservator. Another pause. The hearing is in 48 hours. Cole stopped walking. Evelyn, feeling the change in momentum, looked back at him. 6 weeks ago, Cole said. 6 weeks ago. Before the wedding. Before any of this. Cole, they were never planning a marriage. They were running 2 tracks simultaneously. The wedding was the fast option. The conservatorship is the backup. Either way, they get control of the company. Who filed it? The petition was filed by the family attorney of record for the Voss estate, but the supporting medical documentation, the psych evaluations, the competency assessments, all of it, it lists a Dr. Bernard Hale as the examining physician. Bernard Hale, Cole repeated. Evelyn's head turned sharply. She'd heard the name. Ring a bell? Marcus asked. It will, Cole said. I'll call you back. He ended the call. Evelyn was staring at him with an expression he hadn't seen on her face before. Not fear. Something older than fear, the particular expression of someone watching a suspicion they'd almost managed to dismiss get confirmed in real time. Bernard Hale was my father's physician, she said. I know. He signed the death certificate. Her voice was level, carefully, deliberately level. He retired right after. And in the last 6 weeks, he filed a competency evaluation saying you're unfit to manage your own affairs. Cole watched her face. Did you ever see him professionally? Never. She said it with complete certainty. I've met him twice at my father's office. He never treated me. Then he fabricated the documentation. The sentence sat in the cold air between them. There's a hearing in 48 hours, Cole said. If we don't get to that courthouse with evidence, they'll have a conservator appointed, and you won't be able to touch your own accounts, your own company, your own legal decisions. She absorbed this. He watched her absorb it. The particular way this kind of person processes the worst news, not with collapse, but with a strange, terrible consolidation. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders and looked at the road ahead of them and said, Then we need to move faster. That was all. They moved. They were 400 yards from the cache point when the men stepped out of the trees. 2 of them. The North team. Cole had been tracking their probable position in his head, and he'd miscalculated by about 3 minutes, which was his own fault for spending too long on the phone. They were on the logging road, blocking the forward path, dressed in dark tactical gear, and they were not holding the patient posture of security contractors following instructions. One of them had a hand on a weapon that was still holstered. The other one had his out. Ghost went rigid at Cole's left side. Cole stopped the chair. The man with the weapon out was younger, maybe late 20s, with the kind of careful stance that meant training but not extensive experience. He was managing his nerves, which meant the nerves were there to manage. The older one, 40 maybe, short gray at the temples, was the one Cole watched. We're taking the woman, the older one said. Not aggressive, matter of fact. The tone of a man executing a task, not looking for a fight. You can walk away. Cole said nothing. He was counting, 2 visible. The question was whether 2 was the whole number. Mr. Mercer. The older one took 1 step forward. I've read your file. I know what you did before you came up here. I'm not looking to find out if it still applies. Something in his voice that might have been professional respect or the facsimile of it. Just step away from the chair. What happens to her if I do? A half-second beat. That's not your problem. That didn't answer my question. The younger one shifted his weight. The weapon came up 2 inches. Ghost's low sound started again, felt more than heard, a vibration in the air. Last time, the older one said. Cole's hands were on the chair handles. He looked at the road, looked at the trees on either side, looked at the grade ahead and behind, ran the math in the space of a breath. Then he did something neither of them expected. Evelyn, he said quietly, lean forward and hold the armrests. Don't let go. What are you? Hold the armrests. He spun the chair 180 in a single controlled pivot, locked the left wheel, swung the right, Evelyn's weight centered and her hands went to the armrests immediately, trusting the instruction without knowing the reason. And then Cole ran. Not away. At an angle, hard right into the tree line, dragging the chair behind him on one rear wheel in a controlled diagonal that put him off the road and into the trees before the younger man had finished processing the movement. The shot that came, one shot, suppressed, a sound like a staple gun in the cold air, went through the space where he'd been standing. Cole hit the tree line and converted, let the chair down onto both wheels, took the slope, took the underbrush, stopped reading the terrain, and started responding to it. Branches across the face, snow falling from disturbed boughs, the chair catching on everything and clearing everything because he was pushing with everything left in his arms and shoulders and refusing to let it stop. Ghost materialized on his right, clearing the path, 3 seconds ahead of them, weaving through the timber in a pattern that was almost a signal. Left, then a gap in the brush, then left again, down toward something. Cole followed the dog. The terrain dropped sharply. It wasn't so much pushing the chair anymore as controlling the descent, heels digging in, arms burning at the socket, Evelyn not making a sound but both hands white on the armrests. The slope leveled for a brief span and Cole found footing and ran. Behind them, crashing through underbrush, 2 sets of footfalls, closing. Not close enough. Not yet. Ghost stopped. Cole saw why. The cache point. He'd overshot his original route, but the dog had found it anyway, angling south on the run. A low timber structure set so far into the hillside, it looked like a natural feature until you were 12 feet from the door, covered in snow, camouflaged by design, invisible until you knew the shape. Cole hit the door latch, a physical bar, not a lock, because locks fail in cold, yanked it open, got the chair through, followed, pulled the door closed. Dark. Cold. Smelling of diesel and dry storage, he stood with his back against the door, listening. Footsteps. Getting closer, then slowing. The 2 men had hit the slope at speed and were managing the grade. He could hear the pattern of boots changing, the controlled descent. They were good, but the terrain was erasing their time advantage. Cole moved in the dark without the flashlight because he knew where everything was. Tarp on the left, pull it. Radio, propane stove, supplies stacked along the back wall. He got the stove going first, minimum flame, enough to begin cutting the cold. Then the radio. Evelyn sat in the center of the small space, still holding the armrests, breathing hard. "You okay?" he asked. "Define okay," she said, and there was something underneath it that wasn't quite a laugh but wasn't far off. He almost said something, didn't. He keyed the radio, found the channel, and started composing what he needed to say in a format that Marcus Webb would understand and act on without a lengthy explanation. Outside, the footsteps reached the bottom of the slope. Stopped. Cole held his breath. Ghost was pressed flat against the base of the door, head down, making no sound at all. Every muscle locked, the kind of stillness that in 91 pounds of German Shepherd was a statement of intent. 30 seconds, a minute. The footsteps moved away. Not certain. Searching, quartering the terrain. They'd lost the trail when the slope hardened. Good fortune and bad footing, not anything elegant, and Cole knew that. They'd regroup and grid search this area within the hour. He got back on the radio. "Marcus," he said quietly, "I need a name. A lawyer. Someone who knows what's in an estate and can move fast when they need to. Someone who isn't connected to anything Voss adjacent." He paused. Evelyn Cross's father had a personal attorney before the family firm took over. Someone he trusted before the money got big enough to be dangerous. "I need to find that person." A long silence on the other end. Then, "Give me an hour. I've got maybe 40 minutes before this position is compromised." "Then you'd better hope I work fast," the radio hissed. Cole set it down and turned. Evelyn was looking at the wall in front of her. Not at nothing, at a specific point, the focused stare of someone running calculations they hadn't yet reached the end of. "There's something else," she said. He waited. "The second envelope. The one Damon has." She was quiet for a moment. "My father told me about it once. Not what was in it, just that it existed. He said—" She stopped, recalibrated. "He said there are things a man can't say while he's alive that have to be said after." She looked at Cole. "I always thought he meant something personal, sentimental." "And now?" Now I think he meant evidence, she said. I think my father knew what was being built around him. I think he knew and he couldn't prove it while he was alive. And I think whatever is in that envelope will either save everything or bury it, depending on who opens it first. Cole looked at her. In the low light of the propane flame, in a coat 3 sizes too big for her, and a wedding dress that had been through a blizzard and a tunnel and 140 yards of mountain terrain, she looked like something the mountain had tried to break and hadn't quite managed. "We need to get to that lodge," he said. "Damon's there." "I know. His security team is there." "I know that too." She held his gaze. "What exactly was it you did before you came up here?" The radio crackled. Marcus was back, faster than promised. "I found him," Marcus said. "The name is Raymond Cutler. He was Thomas Cross's personal attorney for 16 years before the Voss family recommended the family switch to their firm. Cutler retired, or was pushed out depending on who you ask, about 5 years ago. He's been living in a town called Millhaven, about 80 miles east of your current position." Cole straightened. "Is he still practicing?" "No, but Cole—" Marcus paused in a way that meant what was coming mattered more than what had already been said. "He's been collecting things. Documents. Correspondence. I spoke to his assistant from 15 minutes ago. She said the old man has been waiting for someone to call for 4 years. The propane flame made a small, steady sound in the cold. "He knew," Cole said. "He knew," Marcus confirmed. "And he kept copies." Evelyn's eyes closed briefly. When they opened, they were steady again, that particular steady that came from somewhere deep in the structure of a person, bedrock that the surface damage hadn't reached. Outside, in the near distance, a voice called something. The search team, coordinating. The sound carrying in the cold air with that flat, sourceless quality that made it hard to gauge direction. They had minutes. Cole looked at Evelyn. Evelyn looked at Cole. "Can you drive?" she asked. "There's a truck," he said. "Half-mile north, old Forest Service road." "Of course there is," she said. He got the door. Ghost went out first into the pale morning, head low, already reading the wind, already working the angles that his instincts and his training had fused into something that functioned better than either one alone. They moved north through the timber at a pace that wasn't careful anymore. Careful had a time limit, and theirs had run out. The truck was a '98 Ford F-250 that Cole had purchased with cash from a man in Millhaven who hadn't asked questions and hadn't expected any in return. It sat under a canvas tarp on a Forest Service access road that hadn't seen official use in 11 years, and it started on the third try, which was about what Cole expected from a vehicle that spent its life in mountain cold. He got Evelyn in first, then broke down the chair and loaded it in the bed with a speed that came from having practiced the sequence, not with her specifically, but he'd run the scenario in his head enough times that the mechanics were automatic. Ghost vaulted into the back seat without being asked. He pulled out onto the access road and drove without headlights for the first quarter mile, using the gray morning light and his memory of the terrain in equal measure. When he hit the secondary road and turned east, he clicked the lights on and pushed the truck to the edge of what the icy surface would allow. Evelyn had found the heat controls and turned them up without asking. Her hands were in her lap, fingers flexing slowly, circulation coming back, or nerves, or both. "Tell me about Raymond Cutler," she said. "I know the name, same as you do now." "But you're going to him like you trust him." "I'm going to him because he's the only documented option in the next 40 hours. Cole kept his eyes on the road. "Trust is separate." She was quiet for a moment. "My father mentioned him once, maybe twice. He said Cutler was the last honest attorney he ever had." She turned to look at the side window. "After that, he said the money got too large for honest attorneys." "Your father sounds like he understood things late." "My father understood everything exactly on time," she said, and the evenness in her voice had an edge under it now. "He just couldn't always do anything about it. That's different." Cole said nothing. She wasn't wrong. The road east was empty, too early and too cold for casual traffic, and the storm had discouraged anyone without a reason to be out. They passed through 2 small towns that were barely towns, gas stations and grain elevators, and the occasional house with a porch light still burning against the gray morning, and Cole drove through both of them without stopping. At the edge of the second town, he pulled into a hardware store parking lot, engine running. "I need to make a call," he said, "and you need to hear it." He got Marcus back on the satellite phone, switched it to speaker, and set it on the dash. "You're moving?" Marcus said. East on the 7 connector, heading to Millhaven. What else do you have on Cutler? More than I expected. The sound of papers. Cole, this man has been building a file for 4 years. His assistant, woman named Donna, been with him since the 90s. She said he kept copies of everything from his 16 years with Cross Technologies. Correspondence, internal memos, wire transfer records, meeting notes. A pause. She said he has a recording. Of what? Of a conversation between Thomas Cross and Damon Voss's father, Gerald Voss, the family patriarch, that took place approximately 8 months before Thomas Cross died. Marcus's voice shifted slightly, the way it shifted when he was reading something he considered significant. Cutler was in the room. He was present as Cross's legal representative. He kept the recording without Cross's knowledge, which is legally complicated but also legally irrelevant to what's on it. Evelyn had turned away from the window. She was looking at the phone on the dashboard with an expression that was absolutely still. What's on it? Cole asked. I don't know the specifics. Donna wouldn't say over the phone, but she said Cutler has been waiting for Evelyn Cross specifically to come to him. Not a lawyer, not law enforcement, Evelyn herself. Another pause. He said the recording has to be Evelyn's decision to use because of what it will do to her understanding of her father. The truck was quiet except for the engine. Cole looked at Evelyn. She was looking at the phone. Tell him we'll be there in 2 hours, she said. Her voice was steady. The steadiness had cost her something, but she spent it anyway. 2 hours, Cole relayed. I'll call ahead, Marcus said. And Cole, be aware. I've picked up movement on the Voss side. They filed an emergency motion to accelerate the competency hearing. It was originally scheduled for tomorrow morning. A judge signed an order at 7 a.m., moving it to today at 2 p.m. Cole checked the clock on the dash. 8:14 a.m. That's 6 hours, he said. 5 hours and 46 minutes, Marcus said. And Millhaven is not where the courthouse is. The hearing is in Carver County. That's another 40 minutes east of Millhaven. So we have roughly an hour with Cutler before we have to move. If you don't hit ice. Right. Cole picked up the phone. Marcus. The envelope. What envelope? Evelyn's father left a sealed envelope with his estate. It was supposed to be delivered at the time of her marriage. Damon Voss has it. A longer pause this time. How confident are you of that? It was in her bag at the lodge where the wedding was supposed to happen. He's had her bag since last night. Then it's either been opened or it's been destroyed, Marcus said. I'd assume opened. If it existed and it was dangerous to him, he'd want to know what's in it before deciding whether to destroy it. Unless he didn't know about it. Did he know about it? Cole looked at Evelyn. She thought about it for a moment. I never told him, she said slowly. My father told me about it privately 6 months before he died. He said to tell no one, and I didn't. She paused. I thought he was being sentimental. I thought the secrecy was just his personality. Then Voss doesn't know what he has, Cole said to the phone. He has the bag. He may not have gone through it carefully enough to find the envelope, or he found it and doesn't know what it is. Or he found it and opened it, and now he knows exactly what Cutler has and is already moving to address that. All possible, Cole said. We need Cutler first, everything else after. He ended the call, pulled back onto the road. Ghost put his chin on the center console between the seats and exhaled through his nose, a long, slow breath that in the dog's particular language meant something between patience and readiness. Evelyn put her hand on top of his head without thinking about it, a reflexive gesture, and Ghost didn't move. Neither of them said anything for a long time. Then Evelyn said, the recording, whatever's on it, about my father. Cole kept his eyes on the road. You don't have to hear it, he said. Yes, I do. Okay. I just want to know, She stopped. Restarted. My father wasn't a simple man. He built something from nothing, and he made choices to protect it that I'm not sure I agree with. I knew that about him when he was alive. She was looking at the road ahead. I can handle knowing more of it. I just want to be prepared. There's no way to prepare for that kind of thing, Cole said. In my experience, you just hear it and then you figure out what to do with it after. She turned to look at him then. A long look, the kind that was actually a question. What do you know about it? She asked. That kind of thing. He didn't answer right away. The road curved through a gap in the timber and the landscape opened briefly. A frozen lake on the left, pale and flat and enormous, sky reflected on its surface in shades of gray on gray. I had a team, he said finally, 8 men, in a place I can't name. We were given intelligence that turned out to have been manipulated by people above our pay grade to achieve an outcome they wanted. He paused. 3 of my people didn't come home because of decisions made by men in rooms very far away who weighed those lives against something they considered more important. The lake passed. The trees closed back in. I found out the details 14 months after, he said, through someone like Marcus, and I had to figure out what to do with that while I was still supposed to be operational. What did you do with it? I finished my contract, filed the documentation I had, said what I knew to the people who needed to hear it. A beat. Then I came up here. Evelyn was quiet. Did anything happen? To the people responsible? Some consequences. Not proportionate ones. He shifted his grip on the wheel. That's the usual ratio. She turned back to the road. I'm going to get proportionate consequences, she said. Not a question, not a vow. A statement of intent, low and factual and absolutely serious. Cole almost said something. He drove instead. Raymond Cutler lived in a house on the east end of Mill Haven that looked like a man who had stopped caring about appearances approximately 4 years ago and made his peace with it. The porch needed paint. The driveway hadn't been plowed so much as compressed into a set of tire tracks. A hand-lettered sign on the mailbox said Cutler in letters that had faded to near illegibility. But the lights were on, and the door opened before Cole had finished helping Evelyn out of the truck. The woman in the doorway was somewhere between 60 and 70, small and angular, with white hair cut practically short, and glasses that she pushed up her nose as she looked at them with the assessing frankness of someone who has been a gatekeeper for a very long time. Donna, Cole said, you're Mercer. She looked at Evelyn. Her expression shifted. Not soft, but something in it recognized something. Ms. Cross, he's been up since 4. Come in. The house was warm and slightly cluttered in the way of a man who had converted a spare bedroom into a working archive. Donna led them through a narrow hallway into what had been a dining room and was now stacked floor to near ceiling with bankers' boxes in an organization system that was clearly legible to someone, and probably only that someone. Raymond Cutler was at the table. He was 73 years old, Cole gauged, with the kind of thin that came from something more than age. The hollowed quality of a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had let the weight eat at him. He had white hair and large hands and eyes that were alert in a way his body wasn't bothering to be anymore. He stood when Evelyn came in. Old habit. Then he stood there and looked at her for a long moment. You look like him, he said. Around the eyes. Evelyn didn't say anything. Sit down, please, Cutler said. Both of you. We don't have much time, and I have a lot to tell you and not enough of it. Cole got the chair positioned. Donna appeared with coffee. Not asked for, just produced, and Cole understood she'd been running this man's logistics for so long the offer had become indistinguishable from instinct. Cutler sat back down, pulled a single manila folder from the stack in front of him, and put his hands flat on top of it. Your father came to me 8 months before he died, he said. He spoke directly to Evelyn, not to Cole. He told me he had a problem. He said Gerald Voss, Damon's father, the man behind everything the family does publicly and privately, had approached him about a merger. Not a partnership. A merger. Effectively an acquisition. He said Voss had been very polite about it, and very clear that polite was not the permanent condition. Evelyn's hands were around the coffee mug, not drinking from it, just holding it. My father refused, she said. Your father asked for time to consider, Cutler said, which was the intelligent move. It bought him the ability to document. He asked me to be present at a follow-up meeting with Voss 3 weeks later. He opened the folder. Inside, Cole could see a small digital recorder in a clear evidence bag and a stack of papers with handwritten annotations in the margins. I recorded that meeting. Without consent, Cole said. Cutler looked at him directly. I'm a retired attorney in a one-party consent state, he said, and I had the one party's consent. Thomas told me to record whatever I needed to record to protect the conversation. Then he knew you were recording it. He knew I might. He also knew that asking me explicitly to do so created documentation issues, so he gave me latitude. Cutler looked back at Evelyn. Your father was protecting you. Even then. Evelyn set down the mug. What's on the recording? She asked. Cutler was quiet for a moment. He pushed the folder slightly toward her. Gerald Voss told your father that the merger was going to happen one way or another, that the only variable was how much difficulty Thomas wanted to create for his daughter in the process. He paused. He was specific about what that meant. He said he had a physician on retainer who could provide documentation of cognitive decline. He said he had relationships in 3 different probate courts. He said that Evelyn could inherit a healthy company, or she could inherit a legal war that would run for years and leave nothing worth having by the end of it. The room was very quiet. And then he said, Cutler continued, his voice dropping slightly, that if Thomas chose difficulty, the difficulty wouldn't be limited to the legal variety. Cole looked at Evelyn. Her face was absolutely composed, the kind of composed that was the opposite of calm, the composed of a person who has decided that what they're feeling will have to wait because what they're doing is more urgent. He threatened my father's life, she said. He implied it with sufficient precision that the implication was the threat, Cutler said. Your father's response to that is also on the recording. What did he say? Cutler's jaw worked for a moment. He said, I understand what you're telling me, and I'd like you to leave my office now. He looked at his hands. 3 weeks after that meeting, Gerald Voss died in a car accident. And 5 weeks after that, your father had a heart attack. He looked up. I've believed for 4 years that it wasn't a coincidence. But I had no leverage, no standing. I was a retired attorney with a recording that proved a threat but didn't prove an outcome. What changed? Cole asked. You called Marcus Webb, Cutler said. And Marcus called me at 5 this morning and told me Evelyn Cross was alive and moving east. He looked at Evelyn. Which meant whoever they sent to the mountain failed. Which meant they'd move to the courtroom instead. Which is where I can actually do something. Cole checked the time. 9:47 a.m. The hearing is at 2, he said. Carver County Courthouse. We need whatever you have that can be introduced. I have the recording. I have the original correspondence between your father and Gerald Voss going back 6 years. I have the medical documentation files that were submitted to the probate court. I obtained copies through a contact. They're authenticated. And I have 3 years of financial records showing money movement between the Voss family accounts and Bernard Hale, the physician who signed both the death certificate and the competency evaluation. Cole stared at him. How long have you had the financial records? 2 years? And you've been sitting on them. I've been protecting them, Cutler said, with the first edge Cole had heard in his voice. Sitting on them would have meant I stopped adding to them. I have not stopped adding to them. He let that land for a moment. Without Evelyn making the decision to deploy this material, it's inadmissible. I cannot walk into a courtroom and introduce evidence on behalf of a client who has not retained me. The moment I tried, Voss's attorneys would have it suppressed, and I would be disbarred for the conduct. He looked at Evelyn. You have to be the one. You have to retain me, and you have to authorize me to bring this into that courtroom today. The room waited. Evelyn looked at the folder, looked at the recorder inside it, looked at Cutler. Are you still a good attorney? She asked. Cutler blinked. It wasn't the question he'd expected. I was a very good attorney, he said. I'm rusty. How rusty? I haven't been in a courtroom in 4 years. But you know this case. I know this case better than anyone alive. Evelyn was quiet for a moment. My father trusted you, she said. He told me you were the last honest one he had. He said it like he was sorry he'd let you go. She looked at him directly. That's the entire basis for this. I want you to know that's what I'm working from. Cutler held her gaze. Something moved in his face. Not sentiment, but the acknowledgement of it. That's enough, he said quietly. That's more than enough. Cole had moved to the window while they spoke. The street outside was empty, still, nothing on the road in either direction. But his phone had vibrated twice in the last 5 minutes, and he hadn't looked at it because the conversation at the table needed to finish first. He looked now. Both messages from Marcus. The first said, Voss security team has your vehicle description, flagged at a traffic camera in Millhaven Center 7 minutes ago. The second said, they know where Cutler lives. Cole turned from the window. We need to leave, he said. Right now. All of us. Donna was already moving. She'd been reading the room, and she disappeared into the archive and came back in under 90 seconds with a single hard case the size of a carry-on bag that she set on the table in front of Cutler. "Everything important is in there," she said. "I packed it 6 months ago." Cutler looked at her. "You packed it 6 months ago," he said. "I packed it the day Marcus Webb first called asking about the Cross estate." She picked up her own coat from the hook by the door. "I'm coming with you. Don't argue." Cutler didn't argue. Cole got the chair, got Evelyn, got the door. Ghost went out first and stood on the porch reading the air. Clean. For now. They loaded into the truck with this hard case in the cab between Cutler and Donna in the back seat, and Cole had the engine running before the doors were fully closed. "Carver County," Cole said. "Take the back route," Cutler said immediately. "Not the highway. They'll have eyes on the highway." He began directing from memory, left at the grain elevator, right on the county road, through the Teller farm property on the easement track, rejoined the paved road 6 miles east of town. He spoke the turns with the confidence of a man who had run this route in his head many times, which meant Cole wasn't the only one who'd been preparing for something without knowing its exact shape. They cleared Millhaven with 11 minutes to spare before a black Escalade turned onto Cutler Street. Cole watched it in the rearview mirror as the road curved and the town disappeared behind the tree line. Ghost pressed his nose to the window glass, leaving a fog print that slowly contracted in the cold air. The Carver County Courthouse was a 3-story limestone building that looked like it had been designed to communicate permanence and had been slowly succeeding at it for 80 years. The parking lot was half full. A Tuesday morning in winter, the usual churn of domestic hearings and traffic cases and the occasional civil matter. Nothing about the exterior suggested that anything particularly significant was happening inside. Cole knew better. He checked the time as he cut the engine. 1:48 p.m., 12 minutes. "Can you be ready in 12 minutes?" Cole asked Cutler. The old man had been reviewing documents from the hard case for the last 40 miles. He looked up with the particular focus of a person who has found their footing after a long absence from familiar ground. "I've been ready for 4 years," Cutler said. Cole got out of the truck and scanned the parking lot before he opened the passenger door. 2 cars he didn't recognize near the entrance. A man in a dark coat standing near the building's east corner who was dressed slightly too well for a Tuesday courthouse visit and was paying slightly too much attention to the parking lot. One visible. Probably not alone. He opened Evelyn's door. "There's security inside," she said. Not a question. She'd been watching the lot from the moment they pulled in. "Yes. Damon will be in there." "Almost certainly." She looked at the courthouse, at the limestone steps leading to the entrance, at the distance between the truck and those steps. "I can do those stairs," she said. "Don't help me unless I ask." "Okay." "I mean it." "I know you mean it." She moved the chair to the door edge, transferred her weight with the practiced efficiency of someone who had made 1,000 similar calculations, and got herself down to the parking lot surface without his hands. He stood back. Ghost stayed at his side. She started across the lot. Cole walked beside her, 1 pace behind and 1 pace to the right. The same position he'd held for 2 days, without making a decision about it. Just there, in the space that needed to be covered. The man by the east corner watched them. Cole watched him back. Neither of them did anything. Inside, the courthouse was warm and fluorescent and smelled of old paper and floor wax. A security checkpoint, metal detector, the bored professionalism of courthouse security officers who had seen everything and been surprised by almost none of it. Cole put the K-bar in the tray without being asked. The officer looked at it, looked at Cole. "Retrieved in the hearing," Cole said. The officer put it in a lockbox under the counter without comment. They moved through. The directory on the wall showed Courtroom 3 on the 2nd floor, Probate Division. The elevator was directly ahead. Evelyn moved to it and Cole reached past her to hit the button, and she didn't comment on that, which he took to mean she'd already used enough independence for one morning and was budgeting for the afternoon. The elevator opened on the 2nd floor to a hallway where the sound of voices immediately told Cole the hearing had already started. He looked at Cutler. "They moved it up," Cutler said grimly. Cole moved down the hallway to the courtroom doors. Through the narrow, reinforced window in the door, he could see the room, standard layout, the judge's bench elevated at the front, attorneys' tables below, gallery behind the bar. The Voss family's legal team had apparently brought 3 attorneys, all of whom were expensively dressed and positioned at the petitioner's table with the comfortable posture of people who expected this to go a particular way. He could see the back of Damon Voss's head in the front row of the gallery. Beside him, Margaret Voss, sitting straight-backed and still. And at the respondents' table, the table where Evelyn's representation should have been, a single court-appointed attorney who looked overwhelmed in the particular way of someone assigned to a case they'd been handed 40 minutes ago. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver-framed glasses, was speaking. Cole pushed the door open. The sound of the door stopped everything. Every head in the room turned. Evelyn came through first, moving the chair herself, and Cole came in behind her with Ghost at his heel, and Cutler came through last, the hard case in his hand, dressed in a court-appropriate jacket that Donna had apparently produced from somewhere in the logistics of the last 40 minutes. The Voss attorneys looked at each other. Damon Voss went very still. Margaret Voss's expression didn't change, which was its own kind of tell. "Your Honor," Cutler said, and his voice in the acoustic space of the courtroom was stronger than it had been all morning, filled out by the room and by something that had been asleep in him for 4 years and was now thoroughly awake. "My name is Raymond Cutler. I am Ms. Cross's legal representative. I apologize for the delay. I have evidence material to these proceedings that I respectfully request the court review before any determination is made." The judge looked at him over her glasses, looked at Evelyn, looked at the hard case. "Mr. Cutler," she said, "the hearing began 7 minutes ago." "I'm aware, Your Honor, and I would have been here 7 minutes ago if opposing counsel hadn't filed an emergency acceleration motion at 7 this morning." He set the hard case on the respondent's table. "I'd also note that the petitioner's timeline is of particular relevance to the evidence I'm about to introduce." One of the Voss attorneys was already on his feet. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular." "Sit down, Mr. Thorne," the judge said, without heat. She was looking at Cutler with the expression of someone recalibrating. "Let me see what he has." What followed was not smooth. It was not the composed, cinematic unraveling that happens in films where every piece slots into place and the villain understands they've lost and conducts themselves accordingly. It was messy and contested and loud in the way that real legal proceedings are loud. Objections, counter motions, 2 recesses called in 90 minutes. One instance where a Voss attorney spoke over the judge and received a response that removed all remaining ambiguity about who controlled the room. The recording stopped everything. Cutler played it through portable speakers he'd brought in the hard case. Donna had thought of that too. The audio quality was what you'd expect from a recording made covertly in 2001 on equipment that was functional rather than sophisticated. Compressed, slightly tinny, with a room hum underneath that never entirely went away. But the voices were clear. Thomas Cross's voice and the voice of Gerald Voss, and the exchange between them that was exactly what Cutler had described, and worse. The worse was that Thomas Cross, on the recording, had stated plainly that he believed the merger conversation was a prelude to something more direct, and that he had documented his concerns with a private investigator and arranged for those documents to be transmitted to a federal agency contact in the event of his unexpected death. He had, he said, taken precautions. Gerald Voss's response to that, on the recording, was a silence of approximately 4 seconds, followed by the sound of a chair moving. Then he said, "Thomas, you should take better care of your health." The courtroom was very quiet when the recording ended. Then Damon Voss stood up. He didn't say anything coherent. That was the thing. Cole had expected the smooth voice from the phone call, the calibrated attorney language, the pivot to a new frame. Instead, what came out of Damon Voss as he stood in the gallery of Courtroom 3 in the Carver County Courthouse was something that had been under pressure for too long and came out badly. A broken kind of statement that was half accusation and half something that sounded almost like confession. He moved toward the respondent's table. Specifically, he moved toward Cutler. Cole was out of his seat before the movement completed. He wasn't the only one. The bailiff was moving from his position near the door. But Cole was closer and the angle was better, and he'd been reading Damon Voss's body language for the last 90 minutes, the way he used to read rooms in other countries where the stakes were similar and the warning signs were the same, regardless of language. He stepped between Damon and the table. Damon's hand came up. Not a weapon, not a punch, but a grab, the desperate physical insistence of a man who had lost control of everything and was reaching for the nearest thing to hold. Ghost, who had been lying under the respondent's table for 90 minutes with the patience of a creature who understood waiting, came out from under it in one motion. 91 pounds of German Shepherd at Damon Voss's forearm was sufficient to communicate the essential point without breaking anything. Damon went backward, sat down hard in the gallery aisle. Stayed there. The courtroom did the thing courtrooms do in moments like that. Went absolutely still, every person in it processing what they'd just seen at a different speed. The collective intake of breath before the room finds its next sound. The judge found it first. "Bailiff," she said. Her voice was the same temperature it had been all afternoon. "Please see to Mr. Voss." She looked at the attorneys. "Both sides will remain available while I review the submitted materials. We will reconvene in 1 hour." She looked at Cole, then at Ghost. "The dog will remain outside the courtroom for the remainder of this proceeding." Cole looked at Ghost. Ghost looked at Cole. "Yeah," Cole said. "Fair enough." He took Ghost into the hallway and stood with his back against the wall and let the last 48 hours settle into him the way things settle when the immediate action is over and your body is reminding you that you are, in fact, made of human material that has limits. His hands were not entirely steady. He looked at them for a moment, pressed them flat against his thighs, breathed. Through the courtroom door he could hear Evelyn's voice, clear, composed, answering the judge's questions in the tone of a woman who had always known her own mind and was finally in a room where that was allowed to matter. Ghost sat down beside Cole's left leg and leaned against him slightly, just slightly. Cole put his hand on the dog's head. Neither of them moved for a long time. The hour the judge had asked for turned into 2. Cole spent most of it in the hallway with Ghost, standing or sitting on the bench outside courtroom 3 with his back against the wall and his eyes on the corridor in both directions. Not because he expected another approach, but because standing down wasn't something he'd ever been good at when the situation was still technically open. His body didn't know how to file that category as resolved until someone official said the word. Donna came out at the 40-minute mark with 2 cups of coffee from a machine down the hall that she'd found without being told where it was. She handed one to Cole without comment, sat on the bench beside him, and looked at the middle distance with the composed patience of a woman who had been waiting for things to resolve for a very long time. "How long have you been with him?" Cole asked. 26 years, she said. "And you packed that case 6 months ago." "I packed it and repacked it twice." She took a sip of her coffee. "The first version was too heavy. I kept adding things that weren't essential." She paused. "When you've been waiting for something long enough, you start including everything because you stop being able to judge what matters." Cole looked at the courtroom door. "He's good in there," he said. "He was always good," Donna said. "He just needed a reason to be good again." She stood up, smoothed her coat, picked up her cup. "That's usually how it works." She went back in. Cole sat with Ghost and drank bad coffee and waited. At 4:22 in the afternoon, the courtroom door opened and Evelyn came through it. Cole stood. He looked at her face first. That was the read, always the face. And what he saw there was not relief, not triumph, not the particular brightness of someone who had just won something. It was quieter than that. The expression of someone who has set down a weight they'd been carrying so long they'd forgotten the weight was separate from them. She dismissed the petition, Evelyn said, with prejudice. She also referred the fabricated medical documentation to the State Attorney General's office and made a formal statement on the record about the integrity of the evidence submitted by the petitioner's team. Cole nodded. "And the recording?" "Has been submitted to the federal contacts Marcus identified. 2 agencies. She ordered it preserved as part of the evidentiary record." Evelyn looked at her hands for a moment. "Damon is in custody. The bailiff held him pending an arraignment. His attorneys are loudly displeased about that." Something crossed her face. "Margaret Voss left before the ruling. No one stopped her leaving, which I'm told is being addressed." "And Bernard Hale?" "Cutler has already filed a complaint with the State Medical Board and submitted the financial records to the AG's referral." She looked up. "It won't be fast. None of the follow-on pieces will be fast. Cutler told me this is the beginning of a legal process that might take 2 years to complete." "How do you feel about 2 years?" She considered the question seriously, which he'd learned was what she did with questions that deserved it. "I've been in this for 4 years without knowing it," she said. 2 more years where I know what I'm fighting seems manageable." Ghost pressed his nose against her hand. She looked down at him, and her face did the thing it did when she looked at the dog. That involuntary softening, the one place where the composed exterior had never entirely held. "Good dog," she said, same as the first night. Same words, entirely different weight. Cutler came through the door behind her, moving with a walk that was slightly different from the walk he'd had coming in. Something in the spine, something in the way he was carrying the hard case. Not lighter exactly, more settled. "Miss Cross," he said, "we have considerable work ahead of us." "I know. I should also tell you," he paused, and the pause had something in it. "Your father's sealed envelope. I called ahead to the lodge while we were in recess. I reached the property manager." He looked at Evelyn carefully. "Damon Voss checked out of the lodge at 6 this morning. The bag was left in the room. Intact. He didn't take it." Evelyn was very still. "He didn't know what he had," Cole said. "He either didn't look carefully or didn't recognize it," Cutler said. "The envelope is still there. The manager has it secured." He held Evelyn's gaze. "Whenever you're ready." The hallway was quiet for a moment. "Tomorrow," Evelyn said. "Tonight I just need tonight." Cutler nodded. "Tomorrow," he said. He shook Cole's hand with both of his. The grip of an old man who meant it, who wasn't performing gratitude but actually felt it as a physical thing. Then he and Donna moved down the hall toward the elevator, the hard case between them, already talking in low voices about filings and timelines and the specific language of the AG referral. Cole watched them go. Then he looked at Evelyn. "Where do you want to go tonight?" he asked. She looked at him for a moment. "Is the cabin still standing?" He thought about the team that had breached it, the doors, the damage. "Structurally," he said. "It's been through worse." "Then that's where I want to go," she said. "I want to go back to where this started." They drove back in the dark. Not because it was the right call logistically. It wasn't. A motel in Carver County would have been the sensible choice. But because Evelyn had said it and meant it, and Cole understood the impulse even if he wouldn't have named it the same way she might. There are places you need to return to after something like this. Places where the ground of the thing is located, where the decision was made, where you need to stand again and see it differently now that you know how it ended. Marcus called at 6. Cole answered on speaker. "I have updates," Marcus said. "Go." Margaret Voss was picked up at a regional airport at 4:45. Private charter, flight plan to the Caymans, which tells you something about how confident she felt going into today. A pause. "She's being held pending federal questioning on the sealed matter I couldn't get specifics on before. I have specifics now. It's not just fraud. The sealed matter involves 2 deaths. Your 2 deaths. Thomas Cross. Gerald Voss's convenient car accident that had preceded it." Cole looked at the road. "How solid?" he asked. "Solid enough to hold her. Whether it converts to a conviction is a different question that will take longer to answer." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Cole, you should know. The team that came to your cabin this morning, the security contractors, 3 of them are in federal custody as of 2 hours ago. The 4th is cooperating." "Cooperating with who?" "Multiple agencies that are now very interested in each other's information about the Voss family's activities over the last decade." Another pause. "You generated a significant amount of institutional attention in the last 48 hours. Is that a problem for me?" "Surprisingly, no. The opposite, actually." The pause this time had a quality of reluctance in it, like a man who respects privacy, saying something that abrades against that respect. "There are 2 people at the DIA who have been asking about you for the last 18 months. After what you navigated up there, the tactical piece, the intelligence piece, the legal piece, they're asking louder." Cole said nothing. "I told them you were retired," Marcus said. "I am retired." "I told them that too." The line was quiet. "Take care of yourself, Cole." The call ended. Evelyn had heard all of it. She was looking at the dark road ahead. "DIA," she said. "Defense Intelligence Agency. They want you back." "They've wanted a version of me back for a while," Cole said. "Not exactly me. A me that doesn't exist anymore." She was quiet. Then, "What version of you exists now?" He thought about that honestly, which was the only way he knew how to think about it. "Still working that out," he said. She turned to look at him. In the dashboard light, her face was angular and tired, and more itself than it had been at any point in the last 2 days. The performance of composure gone, nothing left to manage, just what was actually there underneath. That's a better answer than most people would give, she said. Most people haven't had to blow up their own answer and start over. I have, she said. Twice. She looked back at the road. It gets easier, not easy, easier. Ghost exhaled from the back seat. The cabin was damaged but standing. The front door had been forced and was currently held shut by a length of paracord Cole had run through the interior handle and secured to a wall mount. Not elegant, but functional, which was the usual standard. 2 windows had been broken, both on the north face, both now covered with the emergency polycarbonate sheeting from Cole's supply cache. The interior had been searched, thoroughly, professionally, with the particular disorder of people who are competent rather than destructive. Things moved and not replaced, drawers open, the floor panel over the tunnel entrance located and left raised. They'd found the tunnel and hadn't used it, which meant they'd had enough people to cover both exits simultaneously and had chosen the frontal approach as primary. Cole noted all of this the way he'd been trained to note things, without feeling, in the assessment phase, feeling coming later when there was space for it. He got the fire going while Evelyn moved through the space with a quiet attention that he recognized as her processing mode. Not talking, just observing, filing. Ghost went directly to his position near the door, circled once, lay down. Home, in the dog's assessment, still home. Cole found a can of soup that hadn't been taken or disturbed. The search team had been looking for people and documents, not food, and heated it on the stove. He found 2 mugs that weren't broken. He poured equal portions and brought one to Evelyn, who had positioned herself near the fire with her hands in her lap, looking at the flames with an expression he didn't try to read. She took the mug. They sat without speaking for a while. The fire worked. The wind outside moved through the trees with the sound it always had up here, which was its own kind of company. Not hostile, just present, indifferent in the way of large things that were here before you and would be hereafter. My father's envelope, Evelyn said. Cole waited. I've been thinking about what Cutler said. That my father left it because there were things he couldn't say while he was alive. She turned the mug in her hands. I've been deciding what I want that to mean before I open it. What do you mean? I mean, I have a version of my father that I've carried for 4 years, since he died. It's not a perfect version. I knew him. I knew his flaws. He was controlling and occasionally dishonest in the small ways that powerful men are dishonest, and he was not always there in the ways I needed him to be when I was young. She paused. But I also knew he loved me. That was never a question, and I knew he was afraid for me at the end, which I didn't understand then, and now I do. Cole said nothing. Whatever's in that envelope, it's going to change the version I carry. It might make it better. It might make it more complicated. She looked at him. I just wanted to decide before I open it that whatever it says, I'm going to let him be a man who made mistakes and also loved his daughter and did what he could with what he had. She was quiet. That's what I'm taking in with me. So the document doesn't become the whole story. Cole looked at the fire. That's a hard thing to hold, he said. I know. A pause. Are you good at that? Holding complicated versions of people? He thought about the 3 men who hadn't come home, about the people above his pay grade who'd made decisions in rooms he wasn't in, about the 12 years he'd given to something he still believed in even after it had used him badly. I'm getting better at it, he said. She almost smiled. He could see it at the corners. Good, she said. Me too. In the morning, she called her board. Cole heard pieces of it from the other side of the cabin. Not deliberately. The space didn't allow for privacy, but he kept his attention on other things and let the content of it blur into general impression. The impression was of a woman who had been underestimated by people who should have known better, speaking in her professional voice, which was precise and unhurried and carried beneath it a quality like low current. Not visible, but if you touched the wrong thing, you'd feel it. The call lasted 40 minutes. When it ended, she set the phone on her knee and looked at the ceiling for a moment. 3 of the 7 board members were aware of the conservatorship filing, she said. They didn't initiate it, but they were told about it, and they didn't tell me. What are you going to do? Ask them to resign by the end of the week. She lowered her head. If they don't, I'll remove them. The charter allows it under the circumstances, which Cutler confirmed this morning. She paused. I feel I feel less surprised than I should. That's the part that bothers me. I look back and there were things I rationalized because I didn't want to see them clearly. That's not a flaw, Cole said. That's just what trust costs. She looked at him. When did you figure that out? Later than I should have. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I want to offer you something. He waited. I'm going to rebuild the company with the people who actually belong in it, she said. My father built cross technologies on defense contracts, federal systems, satellite infrastructure. The next phase, what I want to build, is different. Private security infrastructure. Protective services for people who can't access them through conventional channels. Operational intelligence support for entities that need it without federal entanglement. She met his gaze. I need someone who understands those fields from the inside. Not as a consultant, as a partner in building the division. Cole was quiet. That's not a job offer, she said quickly. I'm not trying to... She stopped. That came out wrong. I'm not trying to make this transactional. I know what you're trying to do, he said. Then what's the problem? No problem. He looked at the window, the snow-covered clearing outside, the tree line beyond, the flat winter sky above all of it. I just need to think about it. That's fair. The cabin needs to stay, he said. She blinked. What? Whatever I do, wherever this goes, the cabin stays. I need to be able to come back here. She looked around the space, the repaired windows, the forced door, the floor panel still open over the tunnel. The fire that had been going for 2 days. The cabin stays, she said, obviously. Ghost stood up from his position by the door, walked to the center of the room, looked at both of them with the flat assessment of a creature who has been tracking the conversation without understanding its language but understanding its meaning perfectly well, then walked back to the door and lay down again. The two of them watched him do this. He's unimpressed, Evelyn said. He's satisfied, Cole said. That's different. They collected the envelope from the lodge that afternoon. The property manager, a quiet man in his 50s who looked like he'd had a genuinely unusual 48 hours, handed it to Evelyn in the lobby without ceremony. It was a standard letter envelope, sealed with wax, her name written on the front in her father's handwriting. The letters were careful, deliberate. The handwriting of a man who had known this would be the last thing he gave her and had taken his time with even the small parts of it. She held it in her lap in the truck for a long time before she opened it. Cole drove. He didn't look over. He heard the paper, the small sound of it unfolding, then silence. He gave her the silence. A few miles passed. He knew, she said finally. Her voice was rough at the edges in a way it hadn't been before. He knew what they were planning. He wrote it down. He named Gerald Voss and Bernard Hale, and he named 2 other people, one of whom is a federal judge, and one of whom sits on a congressional oversight committee. She stopped. He wrote that he was afraid if he went to the authorities directly, the material would be suppressed before it reached anyone who could act on it. A pause. He wrote that he trusted Cutler, that Cutler would know what to do with the rest. Cole said nothing. He wrote... She stopped. Started again. He wrote that he was sorry he couldn't protect me better, that he'd built something too large and hadn't understood soon enough what that size attracted. She was quiet for a moment. He said the company was never what mattered. He said I was what mattered. He said that more than once. The road moved under them. Cole let another mile pass before he said anything. He did what he could with what he had, he said. A long silence. Yeah, she said. He did. The legal process took 22 months from that afternoon in Carver County to its final resolution. Bernard Hale surrendered his medical license in the 4th month and entered a cooperation agreement with the federal prosecutor's office that provided the documented chain between his fraudulent certifications, the Voss family accounts, and 2 deaths that had previously been classified as natural causes. Margaret Voss was indicted on federal charges in the 7th month. She retained 4 of the most expensive defense attorneys in the country and still faced a trial date in the following year that she met with the same composed stillness she'd stood in Cole's doorway with. Only now the stillness read differently, as what it actually was, which was a woman who had run out of rooms to control. Damon Voss pleaded guilty to conspiracy charges in the 11th month in an agreement that avoided a trial and provided additional cooperation against his mother's case. His attorney read the statement. Damon Voss did not speak. The federal judge named in Thomas Cross's letter resigned from the bench in the 9th month, citing health reasons that nobody believed and nobody formally contested. The congressional oversight member announced he would not seek re-election. The investigations into both of them continued past the story's visible end, grinding forward in the way federal investigations do, slowly, unglamorously, without the satisfaction of a clean moment where the thing is simply over. Evelyn rebuilt the board. It took 4 months to find the right people and 2 contentious meetings to seat them, and the last of the disloyal 3 refused to resign voluntarily and had to be formally removed, which he contested, which added 6 weeks and a significant amount of legal fees, and which he ultimately lost. The new board was smaller, better compensated, and chosen on a set of criteria that Evelyn had written herself over a weekend at the cabin in the mountains, sitting by the fire with a legal pad and Ghost at her feet. She retained Cutler permanently, not as lead counsel. He was too old for that volume and said so directly, which she respected. But as senior advisor, the voice she called when the decision was complicated, and she wanted to hear what a man who'd been sitting with the full picture for 20 years thought about it. Donna came with him, as she had always come with him, and set up an office in the Cross Technologies building that was organized in a way nobody else entirely understood, and that produced what was needed when it was needed with a reliability that stopped being surprising after the 3rd month. The Veterans and Service Dog Foundation was Evelyn's idea, but she credits it to Ghost, which is not strictly accurate but is the version she tells in every public interview and which Cole has never corrected because it's true in the way that matters more than the literal way. The foundation was operational by the end of the 1st year. It provided working dog partnerships to veterans dealing with the particular kind of damage that doesn't show on an X-ray, the damage Cole knew the word for and didn't use casually, and it provided funding for the long-term operational support that these partnerships required but rarely received. By the end of the 2nd year, it had placed 47 dogs. By the end of the 3rd, 112. Cole ran the security division. It wasn't what he'd done before. Cleaner than that, more bounded, operating with the legal framework he'd spent 12 years bumping against as a constraint and now inhabited differently, from the inside instead of the edge. He hired people he'd served with and people he hadn't, people who were good and who had ended up in the particular kind of nowhere that military service sometimes delivered people to, who were capable of much more than their current circumstances reflected. He kept the cabin. He drove up on weekends when the season allowed and on the occasional week when it didn't, and the truck could manage the access road. He split wood. He checked the structure. He sat by the fire and listened to the wind in the tree line and let his mind do the slow work that fast environments didn't leave space for. Ghost went with him every time. The dog was 7 years old by the time the legal proceedings fully resolved, and slower on the stairs than he used to be, and liked the fire more than he used to, and still lifted his head at sounds that didn't register as sounds to anyone else in the room. He had a bed in Cole's office at the Cross Technologies building, and a bed in the cabin, and a 3rd bed, technically, in Evelyn's office on the 14th floor, which had appeared without announcement, and which neither Cole nor Evelyn directly acknowledged, but which Ghost used without apology. Cole and Evelyn didn't talk about what they were for almost a year. This was partly because they were both people who didn't talk about things until the talking served a purpose, and partly because what they were was obvious enough that the conversation felt redundant, and partly because some things are better built in the doing of them than in the naming. Evelyn said it first. She said it on a Tuesday evening in the cabin, sitting by the fire, the legal pad on her knee and the foundation report spread on the table beside her and Ghost between them, taking up more of the floor than his size technically required. "I want to tell you something," she said. Cole looked up from the map he'd been annotating, terrain surveys for the division's training program. "I spent a long time," she said, "believing that the things I was afraid of were specific things. The company, the money, the people who wanted to take it." She looked at the fire. "But I think what I was actually afraid of was needing people, depending on someone and having it used against me." She paused. "Which is a reasonable fear to develop under the circumstances." Cole set the map down. "I depend on you," she said. "That's what I want to say. I've been depending on you for a while and I'm not afraid of it anymore, and I wanted you to know." The fire made its small sounds. Ghost put his head on Evelyn's foot. "I know," Cole said. "Is that all you're going to say?" He was quiet for a moment. "No," he said. "I depend on you too. I've been depending on you for a while." He looked at her. "And I'm not afraid of it either." She held his gaze. Then she went back to the Foundation reports, and he went back to the terrain map, and Ghost kept his head on her foot and exhaled one long, slow breath, and the fire burned down another inch. And outside the cabin, the mountain was exactly what it had always been, cold and permanent and indifferent. And inside it was warm. Popo. They married on a Saturday in late October, 3 years after a blizzard and a dog and a set of choices made in the dark by two people who had both forgotten, temporarily, what it felt like to be in the world and needed reminding. The ceremony was small. Cutler stood with Evelyn. Marcus Webb, who had driven 11 hours rather than flown because he didn't trust airports, stood with Cole. Donna cried during the vows and didn't apologize for it. Ghost wore a bow tie that he tolerated for 40 minutes before Cole quietly removed it. There were no speeches. Neither of them were people who needed speeches. The only moment that came close was when Evelyn, after the formal part was over, looked at Ghost with the expression she always had for him, the one that didn't require any composure, and said quietly, to no one in particular, "Good dog." Ghost's tail moved once, just once. He'd always been a dog of precise responses. Evelyn walked again 21 months after the blizzard. Not easily. Not without the years of work that had preceded it, and the setbacks inside that work, and the days when the progress was invisible and the frustration was not. Not without the physical therapist who told her in the 4th month that the prognosis was genuinely uncertain, and that Evelyn looked at her with a flatness that had made the therapist, reportedly, recalibrate her approach to prognosis conversations. But she walked. Not always. Not every day. The chair remained part of her life and always would be. It was not a deficiency to be overcome. It was a tool, the same way a good attorney was a tool or a satellite radio was a tool, and Evelyn Cross had never had any patience for apologizing for the tools she used to operate in the world. But she could walk when she chose to. The first time she did it in front of Cole, she didn't announce it. She simply stood up from the chair in her office, took 12 steps to the window, and stood looking at the city below for a moment before she came back and sat down. He was sitting across from her when it happened. He didn't say anything. She didn't either. There wasn't anything to say that the 12 steps hadn't already said better. What? There are people the world invests in early. The ones who receive the resources and the recognition and the rooms where decisions are made, who are seen before they've proven themselves because something in their surface reads as legible to the people who control access. And there are others. The ones who are looked past, who are underestimated, dismissed, abandoned, in the specific ways that the world abandons people it has decided don't have the right kind of value. The soldier who is used up and set down. The woman in the wheelchair in the wedding dress left to freeze in a cabin on a mountain. They are not weaker than the ones who get the resources. They are not less than. They have simply been asked to build everything twice, once in the world and once inside themselves, without anyone watching. That second building is the one that holds.